And I have to say, I was expecting a Liverpool win, but every time I see them play, I get more worried and worried about what they could accomplish this season. Beating Real Madrid 2-0 at Anfield in the Champions League, as much as this was a depleted Real Madrid squad, there's still quality in there which you expect to come up in big moments, regardless of the circumstance. I mean, how long have we seen Real Madrid, especially under Ancelotti, not look the part in games, but then still come out winning the biggest trophies? Real Madrid felt second best all over the pitch to Liverpool. Individually, collectively, tactically, athletically, you name it. I thought Liverpool were the better team, and full credit to him, full credit to Arne Slot. There wasn't necessarily anything different about Arne Slot and how he implemented his style, but just the train that this team has gone on since the start of the season, they just keep going. And this shouldn't have been a shock at all. Maybe to people who don't watch La Liga as much and haven't seen Real Madrid's performances, you could be slightly shocked, but no one who's seen both teams play a good amount of times this season should be shocked by the result. But we'll go on to how Liverpool won the game from the attacking point of view first. So Real Madrid are in a sort of passive pressing 4-2-4 that was pushed up high up the pitch, but not pressing high. So it was this weird, very, very mid block. Liverpool lined up in a sort of 2-3-2-3 as they want to do. Gravenberch sitting in between the two fullbacks, with Bradley pushing a little bit higher than Robertson, who would typically sit deeper alongside Van Dijk and Konate, forming a very narrow base. Diaz coming inside a little bit more than Salah, with McAllister and Jones in the 10. And the first issue I thought that appeared instantly for Real Madrid is this guy, Brahim Diaz, who was caught in between Liverpool's two, I would say, best progressors of the ball, without Trent Alexander-Arnold obviously being fit. And that was kind of the beauty of this Liverpool performance. Trent Alexander-Arnold not fit, and they still keep control of the ball and dominate possession for the majority of the game. And Diaz got caught in between dropping on Gravenberch and pressing up into Van Dijk, and he was not really intense with either. And whether this was a case of he was supposed to press Van Dijk when Van Dijk had the ball, and Mbappe would move on to Gravenberch, and it would be a bit of a piston press, with then if the ball went to Konate, Mbappe would press into Konate and Diaz would drop into Gravenberch. But it never really worked, and as a result, Van Dijk and Gravenberch were getting time on the ball, and he could slip these passes into Gravenberch, who could get on the half turn and look to kickstart Liverpool's attacking move. Poor from Brahim Diaz. It was, I'd say, just nowhere near intense enough. But again, how much Mbappe was supposed to play a part, who knows? Camavinga and Modric were tasked with looking after McAllister and Jones, who would start off in the wide 10 positions. Jones wasn't as involved in the earlier stages of the game because that right-hand side was quite strict positionally. Salah was wide right. He didn't really see a lot of the ball at all in the first half. Jones was in the centre with Modric, and Bradley would look to make underlapping runs, but from deeper areas as the ball built up on the left. And where this shape really did disrupt Real Madrid's for Liverpool was McAllister would come into a left-back position or left-wing position at hybrid type in between the two, as Diaz would look to come inside, pulling Valverde narrow, and this would test whether Camavinga was going to come up and mark the area that McAllister had moved into. And there was a lot of issues with that transitional opportunity with Gula and Camavinga, whether Gula comes back and Camavinga just stays in the middle, or Camavinga comes across and Gula stays up on Robertson. And so there was a lot of issues. McAllister moving out wide also gave invitation to Robertson to start attacking this area of the pitch. And this is where the transition of Gula into the defensive shape was caught out. He wasn't a passenger by any means, he wasn't poor, but just those quick decisions with McAllister getting on the ball here, him moving up, getting caught in between the two. Because I say Camavinga wasn't willing to come so wide and leave that centre area of the pitch exposed, especially with Diaz moving inside. And so there were times where Gula would sit in a lot more narrow onto Camavinga to watch McAllister and prevent him from creating in these central areas. But then that ball would end up over the top to Robertson on this left-hand side, who could get a good number of crosses away. Diaz and Nunez or Salah didn't make this final bits of movement to get on the end of him, but he did create a lot from this area. And it was with Gula just getting caught in between McAllister, Robertson, and struggling with the responsibility of having to manage both those players. So whether it would be from the back, whether it would be from Gravenberch finding those balls over, it was always on. Maybe even Diaz receiving the ball here, bringing the press onto him to then slip it in behind. There was always an option. Darwin Nunez as well in these areas, when Camavinga would come in a lot more narrow, would present himself as a little bit of a deeper option to help outnumber the midfield for Real Madrid. And as they just use his back to goal play, which he did really well, fantastically, to lay it off to the supporting players, to Curtis Jones, who resisted the press fantastically when the ball came to him, and was able to create in these areas, spin his player, find maybe Bradley in a bit of space, maybe try and slip the ball through to Salah, which he did for Salah to win the penalty, and Salah had the beating of Furlan Mendy all day. on that right wing position. And the deeper that Real Madrid went, the flatter that back four and midfield four became as they moved into these positions. So it'd be Modric and Camavinga in front, Bellingham moving back into a left midfield position, Gula in this area where he could easily, or more easily, try and track the left back with the space that was created. Diaz and Mbappe with a transitional threat in these areas. But again, the shape would still be the same for Liverpool relatively. Attacking midfielders in the half space. McAllister would also come into this area to make it more of a central overload, with Jones and McAllister and Diaz and Nunes, with Salah and Robertson typically supplying the width. And with Gula getting dragged back into this position here, sometimes Gravenberch would make the movement to come into the space here to receive the ball that would force Diaz to either have to come across or maybe even Camavinga to come out, but he could get that extra couple seconds where he could create in this area, find these players in these spaces where the outnumbering could help. So if Camavinga came into Mark Diaz, Modric not maybe getting close enough to McAllister, or Curtis Jones also coming into positions to try and get on the ball, which he would come across as well if it was McAllister and Gravenberch deep. McAllister could also sit deep as Gravenberch attack these areas, and the energy levels and the lethargy from Real Madrid in that midfield area just weren't good enough. Gula was getting stretched far too wide by Robertson, and Bellingham just wasn't doing enough work on this left-hand side. Mbappe just was a non-factor in defence, and Diaz was so ready to cover this position. So there was always an answer for Liverpool to whatever Real Madrid's defensive shape were. They always had a player in space. And let's say Jones, I thought in the attacking area, when it was tighter, when it was a lot more compact, I thought was brilliant. The way he could spin his marker and create. Also, him pulling over into this area and Salah staying as wide as possible, with this central overload coming over to the left-hand side, created this space. And a few times Liverpool got McAllister in these areas where he found this pass into Bradley, who made a good few underlapping runs in the space between Rudiger and Mendy because of that overload, where he got a good couple of chances away and a good few openings that he probably should have scored from. The quality that McAllister found him with each time was inch perfect, and it just carved Real Madrid open time and time again. Him making these runs as well was what helped McAllister score his first goal, with the link up between the two, McAllister finding him, moving into a space that Bradley found with the reverse pass. As Rudiger had to move across and cover that space, McAllister just found space off the back of him and put it in the back of the net with a real good goal. And it was just, as I say, fantastic display from Liverpool attacking-wise, congesting the centre and using their quality to good use. Where Real Madrid were going to be a danger in these situations was the transitional threat, getting the ball up to Mbappe, who was their only real source of pace to be used on the break, with no Vinicius Jr., with no Rodrigo. Where they did get a lot of quality in these areas was Camavinga, who, along with Rudiger, I thought was Real Madrid's best player on the night. Camavinga was the one player that was really making an effort and using his aggression, his athleticism to win the ball back in these areas, nicking the ball off of Nunes or Diaz or Jones or whoever, aggressively reading situations, reading a pass, and then springing forward with the ball, whether that be through a pass to a player moving into space or carrying the ball forward to then try and hit Liverpool on the break. I will say, with the main threat being Mbappe, you would get the forward runs of Bellingham, you would get the, say, aggressive, powerful runs of Valverde and Diaz and Gula, who aren't maybe great runners, but they're great sort of technical players that can get forward and use a bit of athleticism. Konate managed Mbappe perfectly. Mbappe didn't have much joy on the break. He didn't have much joy in the game at all, but Camavinga would look to find these passes, but Konate defended excellently. Bradley, with his starting position, obviously trying to make those underlapping runs, could get back in and help Konate double up, and they both did a really good job in this area of keeping Mbappe occupied, and he didn't get any space. Mbappe was poor. If he then pulled away a little bit deeper to find a pass, the pass was dreadful, finding Valverde, Camavinga or Gula in these areas. Nowhere near good enough for the quality he possessed. He was dreadful. He's had some bad games for Real Madrid and Mbappe, but against Liverpool, that might have been his worst quite comfortably. I'd hate to think he has a worse game than that, Jesus Christ. But as a result, Liverpool kept their clean sheet from transitional threats. Konate defended well. Van Dijk did on the other side, as much as that wasn't the target, because Mbappe typically sticks to the left. And transitionally, they didn't get carved open, but they did also press and defend well. So we'll go over how they did that. Where Real Madrid allowed Liverpool up the pitch, Liverpool weren't as courteous in allowing Real Madrid up the pitch. They press high, press aggressively, man-to-man, while setting a trap for Real Madrid, and that trap was in the form of Ferland Mendy, who was the spare man. Liverpool didn't have an assigned marker to him, because out of those deeper players, he's the weakest on the ball. You'd get Nunes coming up from Asensio, you'd get Salah coming from Mendy into Rudiger pretty quickly, McAllister and Jones on the two deeper midfielders in Modric and Camavinga, Diaz onto Valverde, I can't remember if I said that or not, Bradley and Robertson marking Gula and Mbappe out wide. Bellingham and Diaz would outnumber Gravenberch, but he did a really good job of patrolling that area, shielding those two. You'd also get Konate and Van Dijk sort of sticking close to him as well, so it didn't look like there was much of an option, and they still had the outnumbering with that three because of that. So, but Gravenberch did a fantastic job with his positioning, it has to be said. He didn't leave an easy pass into him, and they would allow Real Madrid to play that pass into Furlan Mendy. But to be fair, the attitude and the aggression and the press of Liverpool was fantastic. Salah would move back onto Mendy. Jones would come across. Bradley would then move in, allowing Konate to cover across to Mbappe in these areas and manage him as he did all game. He was fantastic against him. So they'd react really well to the space that Mendy had, but they didn't trust Mendy to get control of the ball quick enough for them to really be hurt by it. But Real Madrid fell for it every time. They would try and find Mendy with these passes, if not trying to go long, which again I thought was poor, because the only real player with physicality in that front line is Jude Bellingham. Konate and Van Dijk headed everything away that came near him. As I say, just defended that centre of the pitch excellently. Anything that did go long over to Mbappe, as I said before, Konate and Bradley doubled up on him really well and won near enough every duel. And so it was poor. The only time they got a little bit of joy was when Modric and Camavinga would stagger, leaving a little bit of space around Curtis Jones and McAllister. But again, that didn't happen that often. Camavinga using his athleticism to sprint away from McAllister a few times. They didn't build up through the centre of the pitch that much. It was usually going direct and gamble on a second ball. And to be fair, I do think McAllister and Jones I thought were excellent, both of which I thought 8 or 9 out of 10 performances on the ball, off the ball. They kept that Liverpool team ticking over in possession, as I was speaking about, and off the ball, they did their job superbly. Liverpool got two fantastic centre midfielders. But when they did get a little bit pushed back and that initial pressing phase was gone, they were responsible. It's not as if they weren't aware of that attacking midfield threat. So if I just adjust this slightly, Liverpool would drop back into a 4-2-3-1. They'd protect the centre area of the pitch. Bellingham and Diaz would then have to be man-marked by McAllister dropping in, as Jones was sitting on the two pivots with Nunez, with the two of them dropping in like this, with Salah sort of occupying the space in between Rudiger and Mendy. Diaz dropping in a little bit more as well, but still being wary of the Valverde threat, who would come in a lot more narrower than Mendy. As Mbappe moved inwards, Mendy would then look to occupy the width on the left-hand side. So again, this just meant that Konate and Bradley, who were the best defensive players on the pitch, could manage that a little bit differently. But, the threat wasn't Mendy, the threat was Mbappe, so Bradley could afford to give him a few yards of space and just protect that channel area. And as I say, it was still responsible. Jones could sit on the pivots, even as Modric and Camavinga would look to spread to allow Nunez to press the player on the ball, Asensio or Rudiger getting on it, and just really, really well orchestrated. Jones would sit on the nearest midfielder, allowing Nunez to come across, and they'd work really well in tandem. Diaz and Salah would be a lot more narrow, very zonal in the play, but again, it worked. So it meant that when a Modric got on the ball, who is obviously press resistant and technically class, if he had that just yard of space, he could still make do with it, but then you'd have Salah and Jones converging on him. So they left themselves a little bit outnumbered, but with intent and with that defensive area being a lot more in control and a lot more compact. And as a result, it felt like Van Dijk and Konate just didn't really have much to worry about in these areas, as much as Madrid tried to overload the centre. Valverde wasn't in the game at all from right back. He couldn't use his powerful running to create space. He did try and get forward the odd time on the right-hand side to allow Gula to push inwards, but no real chemistry, no real pattern of play on that side. And Konate and Van Dijk could just read every little danger that came their way. If a player broke past the midfield line, they dealt with it really well. Mbappe wasn't of any use. He wasn't on the ball a lot, and there was no real space for him to work with as the Liverpool defence narrowed up. That narrowness did cause him a bit of trouble, as the quick switch over to Vasquez on the other side when he came on the pitch caused Robertson to have to react and put in a silly little challenge that in the box that resulted in a penalty. Generally, they shaped up well. They just real tidy. They were really compact. They were really responsible, and they were really tight, and they just limited what Madrid could do in those central areas. Madrid couldn't hit long. Didn't really feel like they had the quality to disrupt the lower block, even with Modric on the pitch trying to dictate play. There wasn't really a lot of angles for him to hit, just because of the zonal aspect of how Liverpool marked up. But that's how Liverpool kept him out. They kept the clean sheet. Kelleher did fantastically. The odd shots he was needed to save, obviously fantastic for the penalty. And Liverpool comfortable at the top of the league phase. Madrid looking a bit precarious down there. 3 losses. It ain't good, and there are problems. And with some of the injuries coming back, that'll obviously help. But the Mbappe investment and the Mbappe project so far is not working. Will it eventually work? Probably. But Bellingham, I thought, was anonymous. Didn't think he was in the game whatsoever. Had a few little moments of quality in the second half as the game wore on and Liverpool was sitting back and allowing Real Madrid more time on the ball. But I thought first half he'd have been forgiven for thinking he wasn't even on the pitch. Really poor performance. And Liverpool go marching on Manchester City on Sunday, and I'm worried. I'm worried about the season this could be for Liverpool. Very worried. So we'll end this video now. I'm getting tired about talking so well about Liverpool. But thank you guys for watching. Like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you disliked it, comment down below, tell me why either way, and subscribe if you want to see more. In a bit, lads.